Today's episode contains brief discussions of infant death, gambling addiction, and alcoholism. So if you are sensitive to these topics, please listen at your own discretion. What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna. She was the most beautiful woman of her age, but she also had the brains to match. She used her beauty to rise the ranks of London society and became one of the earliest female celebrities of the 18th century. But this was not all done in vain. Once she had created a name for herself, she also became one of the most respected and prolific writers of her day, and used her writing to advocate for both women's rights and the abolition of slavery. She was beautiful, but she was also brilliant, and she deserves to be remembered just as much for her bright mind as she is for her stunningly good looks. Listeners, today I share with you the story of Mary Robinson, an accomplished actress, poet, writer, activist, and intellectual, and one of the most fascinating women of her age. Born on November 27, 1757, in Bristol, England, Mary was the daughter of an accomplished merchant. Because his business was often overseas, Mary's father was absent for much of her early childhood. He eventually found himself a mistress and abandoned Mary and her mother at a young age. In an effort to build a new life for themselves, Mary and her mother moved to London, where Mary's exceptional beauty began to turn heads. Unfortunately, one of those heads belonged to Thomas Robinson, a young and sickly-looking man who claimed to be the heir to a large estate in Wales. After a few months of persistent persuasion, Mary reluctantly agreed to marry him. She was only 15 years old at the time of their wedding. It soon became clear that Thomas Robinson was a fraud. He had not only lied about being heir to a Welsh estate, but had a severe gambling addiction and notorious wandering eye. Just 2 years into their marriage, Robinson landed him, Mary, and their recently born baby girl into a debtor's prison called the Fleet. While Robinson continued to gamble and indulge in infidelity all through their time in prison, Mary took a job as a copywriter and was eventually able to buy back their freedom. She also spent much of this time writing poetry and published her first book of poems at the age of 18, while still living in the Fleet. Shortly after their release from prison, Mary became acquainted with the theater director in Covent Garden named Richard Sheridan. Sheridan was immediately taken by Mary and sought to make her a star of Drury Lane, a popular theater in Covent Garden. After some training, Mary made her debut as Juliet from Shakespeare's famous tragedy and became an overnight sensation. Over the next few seasons, she performed a number of leading roles, such as Viola from Twelfth Night and Rosalind from As You Like It. But the role she became most famous for was Perdita, the female love interest in The Winter's Tale. and this fame had little to do with Mary's skills as an actress. It was during one of her performances as Perdita that the Prince of Wales, later to become King George IV, fell in love with her at first sight. He immediately began to shower Mary with love letters, and by that spring, Mary and the prince began a very public affair. Between her remarkable beauty, talent as a performer, and now royal lover, Mary soon became a social sensation. In fact, she is considered by many historians to be the first female celebrity of the modern age. She was not only worshipped as the most beautiful woman in England, but also the most fashionable, and she caused crowds and traffic jams everywhere she went. At the height of their affair, the prince convinced Mary to end her career as an actress, despite her immense success on the stage. Instead, he promised to give her £20,000 to sustain herself. Tragically for Mary, the prince lost interest in her just a few months later and abandoned her without paying any of the money he promised. Mary, who had given up her flourishing acting career at the prince's behest, now found herself jobless and deep in debt. Though their affair was short-lived, her time with the prince left a permanent mark on Mary's reputation. She would be referred to as Perdita for the rest of her life. But despite the prince's abandonment of her, it would be Mary having the last laugh. Shortly after their breakup, Mary arranged for her portrait to be done by not one, but 4 of the greatest artists of her day. In a single season, Mary was painted by the renowned portraitists Sir Joshua Reynolds, Thomas Gainsborough, George Romney, and John Hopner. 3 of these 4 portraits were exhibited at that year's Royal Academy exhibition, and Mary once again became the talk of the town. Not only did her portraits receive glowing reviews, but the prince was made to look foolish for wrongdoing such a beautiful woman. Through her portraits, Mary made it known to the public that she did not need the prince to flourish in society. It was through Sir Joshua Reynolds that Mary met Colonel Tarleton, a distinguished military man who made a name for himself fighting for the British in the American War of Independence. Tarleton and Mary soon after embarked upon a steamy affair. Unfortunately, Tarleton was also a gambler, and when he amassed a significant amount of debt, he had to flee the country. Mary, who was pregnant with their child, chased after Tarleton in the middle of the night, catching a severe chill. She subsequently suffered a streptococcal infection, which not only caused her to miscarry, but develop a severe rheumatic fever that left her permanently disabled. Mary's entire life had drastically changed overnight, and she could no longer continue as the beautiful society woman she had become famous as. But instead of letting her tragic circumstances define her, Mary decided to make the best of her unfortunate situation. Now confined to bed for months at a time, she returned to her early passion for writing and transformed herself from actress and socialite to an author. During her 25-year-long writing career, Mary went on to write 7 novels, 4 collections of poems, 2 plays, and several published essays. Much of her writing was radical by nature and advocated for both women's rights and the abolition of slavery. In her late life, she also became the first female poetry editor for the Morning Post. In the last years of her life, Mary also began writing her own autobiography. Tragically, Mary passed away in December of 1800 at the age of 44, before her autobiography was completed. One of her dying wishes was for her daughter to publish Mary's autobiography on her behalf, which her daughter did just a few months later. After her death, Mary Robinson fell into relative obscurity, and when she is remembered, it is far too often for her affair with the Prince of Wales rather than her intellectual pursuits. In this way, Mary's legacy has long been clouded in misogyny, emphasizing her role as mistress and overlooking her immense career as an actress, writer, intellectual, and activist. So in today's episode, we aim to set her record straight and honor Mary as the brilliant, talented, and brave woman she was. A woman who never let the tragedies of her life define her. A woman who transformed herself into one of the most important writers of her day. A woman who used her writing to advocate for a better world. And as a woman, as the romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge once described, of undoubted genius. So without further ado, let's dive in to the incredible life of Mary Robinson. Mary Darby was born on November 27, 1757, in Bristol, England. Her father, Nicholas Darby, was American by origin and claimed to have been close friends with Benjamin Franklin. After moving to Bristol, Nicholas Darby became a reputable merchant and a leading member of the Society of Merchant Venturers, a union of overseas traders. Her mother, Hester Darby, came from a prestigious English family. In fact, she was distantly related to the philosopher John Locke. Hester was a lively and beautiful young woman, and when she came of age, she had many impressive suitors lined up to ask for her hand in marriage. We do not know exactly how Nicholas and Hester first met, but much to her parents' dismay, Hester turned down her other marriage prospects to pursue Nicholas, who her parents felt was beneath her. Hester married Nicholas shortly after, without her parents' approval. Mary was Nicholas and Hester's second surviving child, born shortly after her older sister died of smallpox. Tragically, her sister would not be the only sibling of hers to die prematurely, as one of her younger brothers also died in early childhood. Of her surviving siblings, Mary was the middle child and the only girl in the family, with an older and younger brother. Mary always described her childhood as dark, melancholic, and moody, and feels right out of a Gothic novel. In fact, even the night she was born was an unusually tempestuous night. As Mary once wrote, "I heard my mother say that a more stormy hour she never remembered. The wind whistled, and the rain beat in torrents against the casements of her chamber. Through life, the tempest has followed my footsteps, and I have in vain looked for a short interval of repose from the perseverance of sorrow." If the weather wasn't melodramatic enough, Mary was born in a house that had originally been part of an ancient monastery and still overlooked the cloisters of St. Augustine's Church. Her room could only be reached by climbing a dark, winding staircase, lit only by candle. As Mary described her childhood home, on this spot was built a private house. The front faced a small garden, the gates of which opened to the Minster Green. The west side was bounded by the cathedral, and the back was supported by ancient cloisters of St. Augustine's Monastery. A spot more calculated to inspire the soul with mournful meditation can scarcely be found, even amidst the monuments of antiquity. Mary's personality perfectly matched her gloomy surroundings. She often described herself as a pensive and broody child, drawn to melodrama and melancholy. Instead of playing with her brothers, Mary preferred to spend time in solitude, often daydreaming or caught in serious contemplation. Because her home was still connected to the cathedral, Mary could hear the church's organ play every morning, and she would often sneak out of her room to listen to the organ play somber notes. As Mary later remembered, "I can, at this moment, still recall to memory the sensations I then experienced, the tones that seemed to thrill through my heart, the longing which I felt to unite my feeble voice to the full anthem, and the awful, though sublime impression which the church service never failed to make upon my feelings." As soon as Mary was able to read, she spent her days diving into macabre poetry and memorizing the inscriptions on the tombstones of her local cemetery. By the time she was 7 years old, she could recite several different funerary poems by heart. Her education was furthered when she enrolled in a school run by the famed philanthropist and poet Hannah More. Here Mary would have learned French and arithmetic and improved her reading and writing skills. And on one occasion, More brought Mary and her fellow students to see a production of Shakespeare's King Lear, which instilled in Mary at a young age her love for the theater. Because Mary's father was a successful merchant, he was able to supplement her education with private tutors, who taught Mary how to play the harpsichord and piano. He also bought the family a lavish new home, decorated it with expensive furniture, and filled Mary's closets with fashionable dresses. But while it was her father who provided financial security, it was Mary's mother who offered her emotional support. As Mary later remembered, "Never did I spend a night of separation from the fondest of mothers." In fact, Mary's only criticism of her mother was that she provided a too tender care and spoiled her and her brothers. But unfortunately, Mary's idyllic childhood would come crashing down when she was only 9 years old. In 1766, Mary's father set out to establish a whaling company off the coast of Newfoundland, which not only meant he would be away from his family for upwards of 2 years, but that he would pour most of the family's money into his new endeavor. Mary's mother was against the idea from the start and adamantly decided to stay in Bristol with Mary and her brothers. Mary would hardly see her father for the next year, save when he returned for a few weeks for the winter holidays. As it turned out, Mary's father's business venture was incredibly risky. Newfoundland had only been under British control for a few years and was under frequent attack by the local indigenous tribes. To make matters worse, he tried to, quote, civilize the Indians to employ them. Not only an offensive, but ultimately unsuccessful endeavor. Unsurprisingly, just over a year into his time in Newfoundland, his business was attacked by the local tribe, not only killing crew members, but burning both his settlement and fleet of ships, resulting in thousands of pounds of damage. If her husband's failed business and resulting debt were not humiliating enough for Mary's mother, she also discovered that while abroad, he had found himself a mistress and would be living with his mistress upon his return, instead of with their family. And in order to pay off the cost of his business damages, he would have to sell their family home and belongings. Mary and her mother were left with near to nothing to their name, and Mary's life, which had once been filled with comforts and luxury, would never be the same. How did Mary feel to find out that her father had not only lost all of their family money, but had abandoned her and her mother for another woman? That she would have to leave their home and turn over most of their belongings? Was she frightened, humiliated, or filled with rage over her father's reckless behavior. Mary learned at a young age just how fleeting fortune could be, a lesson that prepared her for a lifetime of disappointments, particularly by the men, like her father, who had promised to take care of her. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Mary's father eventually arranged for Mary and her mother to move into a boarding home in London, while he returned to Newfoundland to relaunch his whaling business. Here in London, Mary enrolled in a school run by a woman named Maribel Lorington. Lorington taught an unconventional and forward-thinking curriculum that provided young girls with an education typically reserved for men. Mary would have received lessons in arithmetic, astronomy, and modern languages. And unlike most girls' schools, which focused on preparing young women for marriage, Lorington made sure that her girls understood that education was for their own personal enjoyment and empowerment. Mary flourished under Lorington's wing, and Lorington particularly encouraged Mary's natural talent for writing. Her time with Lorington would leave an indelible impact on Mary's life and help shape her future career as a writer. As Mary later remarked, "All that I ever learned, I acquired from this extraordinary woman. I applied rigidly to study and acquired a taste for books, which has never, from this time, deserted me." Quite tragically, Lorington also suffered from severe alcoholism. She once confided in Mary that she drank to quiet her grief over her late husband. But as time went on, her condition worsened, and she even began to drink during school hours. Her abuse of alcohol did eventually lead to the school's closure. Though Mary's time with Lorington was short, she would never forget the invaluable lessons Lorington had taught her, the most important of which was that intelligence could be harnessed as a means of power. Many years later, Mary would discover Lorington living on the streets as a beggar. Lorington would die soon after from the effects of years of untreated alcoholism. Though her father had long since stopped supporting Mary and her mother, he did agree to fund her enrollment at Oxford House, where Mary continued her education. But here, Mary would impress her teachers with more than just her writing skills. One of her governesses discovered Mary's natural talent as an actress and began persuading her to audition for the stage. And soon, Mary would catch her big break. It was around this time that Mary was introduced to David Garrick, one of the most famous actors of her day, and the director of Drury Lane, a popular theater in Covent Garden. Though Mary was only 14 years old, it was clear that she was exceptionally beautiful, and it comes with no surprise that Garrick was immediately taken by her. He soon after invited Mary to his home to discuss her training as an actress. How did Mary feel to have caught the attention of the greatest actor of her day, to be offered the opportunity to train with him, and with it, her own chance at becoming a star of the stage? We can only imagine how exhilarated Mary must have been as she entered Garrick's impressive front hall to discuss her potential future. Mary spent the next few weeks training closely with Garrick. He eventually offered her the part of Cordelia in an upcoming production of King Lear. Mary practiced her part for hours at a time, under Garrick's strict scrutiny. As the weeks went on, the public began to take notice of Garrick's beautiful new prodigy, and Mary attracted crowds every time she entered and left the theater. As Mary recalled, "I now found myself an object of attention whenever I appeared at the theater. It was buzzed about that I was the juvenile pupil of Garrick." Though overwhelming at first, Mary quickly came to love every minute of the attention. As she geared up for her big debut, she knew in her heart that she belonged on the stage. As she excitedly wrote, "The drama, the delightful drama, seemed the very criterion of all human happiness." With her exceptionally good looks and all the buzz surrounding her upcoming performance, Mary soon had a long line of eager admirers, desperate for her attention. One of the most dedicated of her pursuers was a man named Thomas Robinson, a young and pale-skinned clerk who lived across the street from Mary. Mary would often find Robinson sitting at his window, shamelessly staring at Mary as she moved about her house. Although Mary and her mother were cautious of Robinson's stalking, they did eventually agree to join him for dinner. It was over dinner that Robinson shared that he was the nephew of a wealthy tailor and heir to a large estate in Wales. Though this did little to sway Mary, her mother was immediately impressed. When in the weeks following their dinner, Robinson began showering Mary with a steady flow of expensive gifts, her mother's fondness towards Robinson only grew. As Mary recalled, "Robinson became so great a favorite that he seemed to her the most perfect of existing beings." Mary began to feel increasingly pressured to marry Robinson by both Robinson and now also her mother, who was convinced that marrying him would secure Mary's future. When Mary worried that marriage would separate her from her mother, Robinson even agreed to let her mother live with them. Though Robinson was accommodating on this front, he was not so understanding of Mary's dream of becoming an actress, despite her plans to debut in the upcoming season and the attention she was already receiving as Garrick's student. It soon became clear that if Mary were to marry Robinson, she would have to give up her future as a woman of the stage. As her mother continued to press her, Mary felt as if she had to choose between fulfilling her life's dream and appeasing her mother's anxieties. As Mary remembered, "It was now Mr. Robinson and my mother united in persuading me to relinquish my project, and so perpetually during these days was I tormented on the subject, that I consented and was married." In the end, Mary decided it was best to concede to her mother's wishes. As Mary explained, "The only circumstance which induced me to marry was that of still being permitted to reside with my mother." Mary's marriage to Thomas Robinson took place on April 12, 1773. Mary was only 15 years old. In fact, she was so young that the officiate admitted he had never before married so young a bride. Though her wedding day should have been a joyous moment, all Mary could think about was her lost dream of becoming an actress. As author Paula Byrne wrote, her thoughts wandered to the theatrical career that she was sacrificing, to the glimmer of fame, and the lost opportunity of an independent livelihood. Mary could barely get through the ceremony before she ran out of the church sobbing. Though it was too late to change her mind, Mary feared that she had just made a grave mistake. Unfortunately, Mary's fears were soon realized. Robinson, who was so insistent upon their marriage, asked that Mary keep their marriage a secret, a request that Mary and her mother found bizarre. Even more suspect was his refusal to introduce Mary to any of his family, including his wealthy uncle, whose estate he claimed to be heir to. As the months went on, Mary and her mother still lived separately from Robinson, who only visited on occasion. Mary became increasingly anxious over Robinson's unusual behavior. She couldn't understand why Robinson suddenly tried to pretend like she didn't exist. Much to Mary and her mother's dismay, it soon became clear that Robinson had completely deceived them. They were shocked to find out that Robinson was not the nephew of his Welsh uncle, but his illegitimate son, who had no rights to the estate. To make matters worse, Robinson had also been hiding a destructive gambling habit and had wasted away the little money he had. How did Mary feel to discover her husband was a fraud, that she had given up her bright future for false promises? Was she furious over his deceptive manipulation of her? As Mary lamented in a letter to a friend, "How can I love that stupid thing, Robinson? Yet I am his. Fortune has made it so. But I cannot think I am bound to abide strictly by an engagement that I was trepanned into, for you know he deceived me." After many exasperated pleas, Robinson finally agreed to take Mary to Wales to meet his quote-unquote uncle, who he still refused to admit was actually his father. Meeting his family would, in the very least, legitimize their marriage and make Mary feel like less of a dirty secret. When Robinson and Mary first arrived at the Welsh estate, his father almost turned them away. But luckily for Robinson, his father quickly became charmed by Mary's good looks and ushered them inside. Despite Robinson having no rights to the estate, his father began to promise Mary that he would leave her anything she liked. As Mary wrote in her memoirs, "He should have liked me for a wife had I not married Tom." Though Mary still felt duped by Robinson, her trip to Wales did make her a little more hopeful for their future. At least his family knew Mary existed, and more than that, she was in their good graces. Upon returning to London, Mary and Robinson finally moved into a new home together in the East End of London. With his father's new promise to leave him and Mary his fortunes, Robinson began to spend recklessly, furnishing their home with fancy furniture and buying Mary stylish new outfits. Mary took the opportunity to make a splash in London's social scene. As author Paula Byrne described, Mary may have lost her chance to perform on Drury Lane, but she saw the metropolis as a great urban stage where she could still be a star. Mary's impeccable looks and flirtatious charm left an impression on everyone she met, and she soon befriended many important society men, politicians, and aristocrats. As Mary wrote, "I was now known by name at every public place in and near the metropolis." Unfortunately, their new luxurious lifestyle did not fix Mary's rocky marriage. While Mary was mingling with London's most impressive crowds, Robinson fell back into bad habits, gambling recklessly, drinking heavily, and indulging in his wandering eye. Though at first Mary tolerated Robinson's antics, enjoying the freedom she had to socialize with London's elite, in the summer of 1744, she discovered she was pregnant with their first child. Mary hoped that upon hearing the news, Robinson would stop his destructive behavior, but he only doubled down on his reckless ways. Mary became increasingly frustrated that while she was home pregnant with their child, Robinson was out drinking himself into a stupor, barely even spending any time with her. To make matters worse, talk around town was that Robinson had found himself an official mistress, an older woman who he had even given a promise ring to. And to add insult to injury, it became clear that Robinson had landed them in significant debt, spending well beyond their means and gambling away what little was left. He was forced to borrow funds from loan sharks to keep creditors away, but this proved to be only a temporary solution. As Mary entered the final stretch of her pregnancy, creditors foreclosed on their home, and Mary and Robinson were forced to evacuate. In a last-ditch effort to help their desperate situation, Robinson convinced Mary to travel with him to Wales, to beg his father to bail them out, despite her being weeks away from giving birth. Unfortunately, after a long and tiring journey, Robinson's father turned them away, no longer showing the now pregnant Mary the affection he had previously. Mary, too pregnant to return to London, rode out the final weeks of her pregnancy in a boarding house in Wales, where she at least enjoyed the quietude of nature. It was here on October 18th, 1774, where Mary gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Maria Elizabeth. Mary was only 17 years old at the time of her daughter's birth. As soon as her baby left her womb, Mary felt an overwhelming and all-encompassing love for her daughter. Though she was so young and had no idea how to care for a baby, she promised her daughter that she would be as devoted a mother as possible, a promise Mary certainly kept throughout her life. Though most women of the aristocracy hired wet nurses to breastfeed their babies, Mary decided that she would breastfeed her daughter herself. She also slept in the same bed as little Maria Elizabeth, something that mothers of her time rarely allowed. Unfortunately, Mary could not enjoy the bliss of early motherhood for long. Just 3 weeks after Maria Elizabeth was born, creditors were back on Robinson's tail and discovered that he and Mary had fled to Wales. Not before long, Robinson was arrested, and he, Mary, and little Maria Elizabeth were escorted all the way back to London by a sheriff. Upon their return, Robinson was committed to a debtor's prison called the Fleet, where over 300 prisoners and their families lived in confined quarters. Though technically it was not required that the wives of prisoners join their husbands in the Fleet, most wives did so because they did not have anywhere else to go. Unfortunately, Mary fell in this camp, and she and little Maria Elizabeth moved to the Fleet with Robinson in May of 1775. Famously filthy, with streets filled with blood and urine, and conditions prime for the rapid spread of disease, the Fleet was no place for a young woman, let alone a newborn child. Mary knew she had to do all she could to keep her and her daughter safe and earn their way out of prison as soon as possible. Robinson, on the other hand, continued to drink senselessly and sleep with prostitutes. When he was offered a job as a copywriter and refused, Mary accepted on his behalf, not only caring for their newborn, but working as the family's sole breadwinner. Quite remarkably, copywriting was not the only writing that Mary did during this time. It was during her months in the Fleet that Mary's career as a poet first began. Though at first Mary started writing poetry to help pass the time, she soon discovered that she could publish her poems for money. Over the course of the next few months, Mary wrote an entire collection of 32 poems, totaling over 130 pages of writing. We get a sense of Mary's skill as a poet, as well as her use of poetry to process her heavy emotions during this time in a poem titled Captivity. As Mary wrote, "The greedy creditor, whose flinty breast the iron hand of avarice hath pressed, whoever owed humanity's soft claim, self-interest and revenge his own aim. Unmoved can hear the parent's heartfelt sigh, unmoved can hear the helpless infant's cry. Nor age, nor sex, his rigid breast can melt, unfeeling for the pangs he never felt. Despite being in prison, Mary was able to win the backing of a publisher named C. Parker, who was so impressed with Mary's poems that he agreed to publish her collection in the summer of 1775. Mary was only 17 years old when she first became a published author. How did Mary feel to publish her first collection of poems? Not only at such a young age, but while she still lived within the confines of a debtor's prison. Did she pinch herself upon hearing the news? How did she celebrate such a remarkable accomplishment? We can only imagine how proud Mary must have been that she had turned the most devastating of circumstances into her greatest achievement. Finally, on August 3rd of 1776, thanks to her hard work and undeterred determination, Mary earned enough money for her family to be released from the fleet. But though Mary was relieved that she and her daughter would no longer have to live within prison walls, she knew that she could not rely on Robinson to keep their debt from quickly accumulating again. Mary would have to find a way to support herself without the help of her husband. Though her poetry had made some money, Mary decided to turn to her other artistic talent to now make a living: acting. Ironically, her grave situation was Mary's golden ticket back to the stage. With their finances still dire and Robinson deep in the throes of a gambling addiction, he no longer had the grounds to prohibit Mary from becoming an actress. Through her connections, Mary was soon after introduced to the famed playwright Richard Sheridan, who had recently taken over Drury Lane after Garrick retired. Like Garrick, Sheridan was immediately taken by Mary and offered her the role of Juliet in an upcoming run of Shakespeare's famous tragic love story. Though so much had happened since she first dreamed of becoming an actress, she had gotten married, become a mother, spent over a year in a debtor's prison, and published her first book of poetry, Mary finally had the opportunity to become a star of the stage. And this time, no one could stop her. Mary made her debut as Juliet on December 10, 1776. On opening night, the theater was filled to capacity, and the crowd was anxious to see Drury Lane's newest star. Though Mary had dreamed of this moment for years, as she prepared to step onto the stage, she became overwhelmed with fear. She knew that this performance could make or break her chance of success. As Mary later remembered, the theater was crowded with fashionable spectators. The green room and orchestra were thronged with critics. When I approached the side wing, my heart throbbed convulsively. I then began to fear that my resolution would fail, almost fainting. But to Mary's pleasant surprise, the crowd instantly began to applaud her as she made her way to the stage. Before Mary even recited her first line, the crowd roared with cheers. As Mary continued in her memoirs, the thundering applause that greeted me nearly overpowered all of my faculties. I stood, mute, and bending with alarm, which did not subside until I had feebly articulated the few sentences of the first short scene, during the whole time of which I never once ventured to look at the audience. I beheld a gradual ascent of heads. All eyes were fixed upon me, and the sensation they conveyed was awfully impressive. If the crowd's roaring applause were any indication, Mary's first performance received raving reviews, not only from the audience, but also from the press. As a review in the General Advertiser wrote, "There has not been a lady on this or any other stage for some seasons who promises to make so capital an actress. She has eloquence and beauty. The grace of her arms is singular. We may venture to pronounce her an acquisition and an ornament." And the Morning Post wrote, "A lady whose name is Robinson made her first appearance last night at this theater in the character of Juliet. Her person is genteel, her voice harmonious, and her features, when properly animated, are striking and expressive. At present, she discovers a theatrical genius in the rough. We will be able to speak of her powers at large when we find her become a little more familiar with the stage." And Mary certainly became more familiar with the stage. Over the course of the next few months, Mary not only played Juliet, but also Viola in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, Ophelia from Hamlet, and Lady Macbeth, among other iconic characters. The various parts Mary played showed her versatile skill as a performer, able to act out both comedic and tragic roles with equal success. Fun fact, it was during these performances that a young Emma Hamilton worked as a costume assistant, dressing Mary for her different parts. If you have not yet listened to our episode on Emma Hamilton, I encourage you to listen as an accompanying episode. As Mary performed more and more, her popularity only grew, as did her paycheck. Sheridan was so happy with Mary's success as an actress that he paid her £10 per performance, a hefty rate reserved only for the biggest stars of the stage. With this, Mary was not only able to support her and her daughter and keep debtors at bay, but for the first time in her life, she had gained financial freedom and self-autonomy. She was able to buy herself fashionable clothes and a new home for her and her daughter in Covent Garden, just a stone's throw away from Drury Lane. She mingled with high society, making powerful connections with London's elite, and reveled in her immense popularity with the public. As Mary wrote, "I looked forward with delight to both the celebrity and fortune." It should be noted that Mary did receive some judgment from high society, who regarded acting as a lower-class profession, and actresses in particular as loose and not to be trusted. Mary often wrote in defense of acting, maintaining that it was a profession of integrity. In Mary's own words, "We have many females on the stage who are ornaments to society, in every respect worthy of imitation. For my part, I adore the theater and think there is more morality to be found in one good tragedy than in all the sermons that were ever printed. With regard to acting, it is an act which demands no small portion of intellectual acquirements. It polishes the manners, enlightens the understanding, gives a finish to external grace, and calls forth all the powers of mental superiority." And quite remarkably, even at the height of her acting career, Mary still made time for her writing, opting out of touring around England so she could work on her poetry. It was during her first 2 years as an actress that Mary was able to publish a second volume of poems. Despite her overwhelming success as both an actress and poet, Mary's marriage, unfortunately, only continued to deteriorate. Their relationship became even more strained when Mary became pregnant in late 1776. Though she gave birth to a healthy baby girl the following May, her daughter suffered from convulsions and passed away at only 6 months old. Instead of extending support, Robinson continued to drink excessively and made frequent visits to brothels. Mary had to grieve the loss of her second daughter, completely alone. But though Robinson treated Mary with almost total neglect, she did grab the attention of plenty of aristocrats, who bribed her with money to become their mistress. In fact, the Duke of Rutland offered her as much as £600 a year to take her under his wing. With her marriage hanging on by a thread, these offers were surely tempting. Luckily, Mary had Sheridan to guide her against these men's advances. As Mary later admitted, "I had been seen and known at all public places from the age of 15, yet I knew as little of the world's deceptions as though I had been educated in the deserts of Siberia. I believed every woman friendly and every man sincere, till I discovered proof that their characters were deceptive." But Sheridan could only guide Mary so much. Just around the corner, Mary would meet the man who would completely sweep her off her feet and forever change the course of her life. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. On December 3rd, 1779, Mary was performing in Shakespeare's The Winter Tale as the female lead, Perdita. On that particular night, the theater was filled to capacity, and in its audience was the royal family, including the then 17-year-old Prince of Wales, George. The prince was known to be particularly handsome, with equal charm and wits to match. As a contemporary of his described, his countenance was of a sweetness and intelligence quite irresistible. He was an elegant person, with engaging and distinguished manners, added to an affectionate disposition and a cheerfulness of youth. As Mary entered the stage that night, she noticed the royal family in their private box, and the prince, in particular, staring at her with bulging eyes. Despite the fact that Mary was in the midst of performing, the prince couldn't help himself but whisper words of flattery to her. Mary tried her best to get through the performance without distraction, but she grew increasingly aware of the prince's attention. As the play ended and she gave her customary curtsy, she finally allowed herself to look up and meet the prince's stare. As Mary described, the prince had a look I shall never forget. He gently inclined his head a second time. I felt the compliment and blushed my gratitude. Before the night had even ended, the prince had fallen madly in love with Mary, and he would do all he could to call her his own. The next morning, the prince excitedly wrote to his friend, "I was delighted at the play last night, and was particularly interested in the appearance of the most beautiful woman that ever I beheld, who acted with such delicacy that she drew tears from my eyes. She perceived how much of my attention was taken up with her, not only during her acting, but when she was behind the scenes, and contrived every little innocent art to captivate a heart. Her name is Robinson. On or off the stage, I have seen her both. She is, I believe, the greatest and most perfect beauty of her sex." And in another letter, written shortly after, the prince declared, "Heavens, was you but to see her! Even the most envious of her sex was to see her. They must confess that she is the most perfect beauty that ever was seen." Despite Mary still being legally married, and that she was clearly socially beneath the royal family, the prince began to pursue Mary with persistent determination. Shortly after attending the theater, the prince showered Mary with love letters, addressing each one to his Perdita. How did Mary feel to have the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne of England, profess his feelings for her with such ardor? To know that she was the sole object of his desire, the one that he doted upon, as if she were a princess herself. As Mary once described of the prince's love letters, there was a beautiful ingenuousness in his language, a warm and enthusiastic adoration, expressed in every letter which interested and charmed me. The prince continued to write to Mary over the course of the next few months, his letters becoming increasingly more forthcoming about his desire to become her lover. Despite being both infatuated and excited by the prince and his proposition, Mary played hard to get, keeping her responses cordial, cool, and non-committal. She reiterated to the prince that she was a married woman, and that their involvement could put his reputation as heir to the throne at stake. And as Mary politely deflected the prince's continued love professions, her fame as an actress only soared to new heights. The prince could often be seen sitting in attendance, gawking at Mary's beauty and desperately seeking her attention. Soon enough, the prince's fixation on Mary became the talk of London, much to the dismay of the royal family, who did not approve of the prince setting his eyes on someone of Mary's class. Though Mary turned down the prince's repeated pleas to become lovers, he eventually made her an offer that she couldn't refuse. In exchange for becoming his mistress, the prince offered Mary £20,000, equivalent to over $1 million today. The only caveat was that Mary would have to give up her acting career, which the prince felt was below her. Mary had not only become one of London's leading actresses by this time, but she was earning a hefty salary. The prince, however, assured her that his financial support would more than compensate for the loss she'd take in income. Understandably, Mary was reluctant to once again have to give up her career as an actress for a man. Not only was she finally financially secure, but she genuinely loved performing and would miss the thrill she felt every time she stepped onto the stage. But despite her reservations, Mary did eventually agree to the prince's conditions, swayed by his, in Mary's own words, sweet smile and melodious yet manly voice. That spring, Mary gave her last performance. How did Mary feel to take her final curtsy in front of a roaring crowd? The last time she would feel the audience's applause buzz through her entire body. Was she devastated to have to say goodbye to the stage she knew so well that it felt like home? Angered that yet another man was forcing her to leave her acting career behind? Or was she filled with peace, ready to leave the stage for a better life ahead? As Mary later recalled of this moment, that I was treading for the last time the boards where I had so often received the most gratifying testimonies of public approbation, where mental exertion had been emboldened by private worth, that I was flying from a happy certainty, perhaps to pursue the phantom disappointment, nearly overwhelmed my faculties. Soon after Mary's final bow, she and the prince officially began their affair. To commemorate the start of their relationship, the prince gifted Mary a miniature portrait of himself, as a token of his love and devotion for her. As Mary fondly remembered of these early days, the prince's attachment seemed to increase daily, and I considered myself as the most blessed of human beings. By that July, the public had caught on to their relationship, and soon every tabloid in London followed their every move. Though Mary had already garnered fame as a star of the stage, Her public affair with the prince quickly turned her into a full-fledged social celebrity. Her presence at any event became a spectacle, and crowds swarmed to gawk at her, whether in awe or disgust. As Mary herself described, "I was overwhelmed by the gazing of the multitude." There were many who admired Mary for winning the prince's affections. Others called her public infidelity shameless. To be fair, Robinson did not seem bothered by Mary's fling with the prince. The only time Mary ever heard from him was to occasionally ask her for money. For the prince's part, he showed no hesitation in being seen in public with Mary, and he even brought her to royal family gatherings at Windsor. He bought Mary her own home in an expensive area in London and furnished it with lavish fittings and decor. He made sure that Mary's closets were filled with dresses in the latest fashion, and he even gave her access to the royal box at the Opera House, an almost unheard of privilege for someone of Mary's class. Though she had to give up her career as an actress, Mary enjoyed every minute of the attention she was getting, both from the public and most of all from the prince himself. In fact, she gleefully admitted to her close friends that the prince made her feel like the luckiest woman in the world. Though Mary's romance with the prince must have felt like a chapter from a storybook, unfortunately, Mary did not get her fairy tale ending. Despite the prince being absolutely smitten with Mary, their relationship was a great concern to the monarchy, and the king in particular was appalled that his son was so publicly involved with a woman of Mary's class, let alone that she was a married woman. He repeatedly pleaded with his son to stop seeing Mary, to no avail. But eventually, knowing that the prince was nearing the age of being formally named the heir to his throne, the king threatened the prince that he would not be named until he ended his relationship with Mary. If he did break things off, he also bribed the prince with additional inheritance. Though the prince harbored real feelings for Mary, the king was eventually able to persuade him to stop seeing her. Mary was caught completely off guard when she received a note from the prince stating, "We must meet no more." The prince offered Mary no explanation or additional context, and she was left completely baffled. Just a few days prior, the prince had expressed his utmost affection for her. Why would the prince suddenly not want to see her anymore? What about his endless confessions of love and acts of adoration? And what about the promise he had made to Mary that he would take care of her? Mary quickly wrote back demanding an explanation for the prince's sudden dismissal of her, but she never received a response. Desperate to understand, Mary even stormed into Windsor and pleaded to speak with the prince, but she was cruelly turned away. Within the blink of an eye, Mary had gone from feeling like she was on top of the world to feeling like a piece of discarded trash. If the prince's unexplainable rejection was not torturous enough, the press soon got word of their breakup. Mary, who had been covered in every paper as London's hottest it girl, suddenly became the subject of a smear campaign. Humiliating caricatures of Mary were published daily, often over-sexualizing her and debasing her integrity. The press's harassment of her got so severe that Mary nearly suffered a nervous breakdown. One friend of Mary's was so concerned for her well-being that she threatened the Morning Post that if one more libelous article was written about Mary, that they would have her blood to answer for. And if the situation could not get any worse, Mary soon learned that the prince had found himself a new mistress, a courtesan named Elizabeth Armistead. While Mary was being dragged through the mud by the press, the prince had already moved on. And unfortunately, with the prince's sudden abandonment of Mary came the sudden retraction of his financial support. Mary was now not only dealing with a broken heart and constant harassment from the press, but was quickly falling into debt, trying to maintain the home and lifestyle the prince had established her in. And because the prince had persuaded her to retire as an actress, she now had no source of income to support herself. As Mary lamented, "I had quitted both my husband and my profession for the prince." Though she had worked so hard to get her family out of debtor's prison, Mary once again had creditors breathing down her throat. Some even asked her for sexual favors in exchange for debt relief. Her situation quickly became desperate, owing over £7,000, amounting to $250,000 today. And to rub salt in her wound, as she fell deeper and deeper into debt, Mary heard the news that the prince had officially been named heir to the throne, only increasing both his political power and wealth. Mary could no longer afford to roll over and die while the prince ascended to power. Before they began their relationship, he had promised to pay her £20,000 as compensation for giving up her acting career, and if he wasn't going to take her back, he should at the very least honor their agreement. At first, Mary approached the subject kindly, gently reminding the prince of his promise and asking that he follow through. But when the prince coldly refused, Mary was forced to take more drastic measures. Knowing that the only real leverage Mary had over the prince were the hundreds of love letters he had sent her over the course of their relationship, Mary threatened to leak these letters to the press if the prince did not honor their agreement. The letters that had once filled Mary's body with joy had now become, in the words of author Paula Byrne, her most dangerous weapon. When the prince brushed off Mary's threats, she went as far as to rent a house in Old Windsor, just steps away from the prince's residence, so that he was constantly reminded that she could publish the letters at any time she wished. Eventually, the prince sent a representative to talk to Mary, and she let him know that she would return these letters to the prince as soon as he paid what was owed. She reiterated that she had been a highly successful and well-paid actress and had given up her career at the behest of the prince. After some back and forth, the prince offered to pay Mary £5,000, a small fraction of his initial promise. Mary was instantly offended. The payment would barely even cover her outstanding debts which had accumulated in the first place due to his repeated promises that he would always take care of her. To respond, Mary hired her own representative, who wrote on Mary's behalf, "The idea of falling from a state of splendor and independence to a level that must at least be degrading to her impresses her with feelings that are hard to be foregone." When the prince once again refused to give her more than £5,000, Mary took it upon herself to respond to the prince directly. In an exasperated letter to the prince, Mary exclaimed, "No earthly power will make me ever receive the smallest support from you. I hope you have every degree of satisfaction in your own mind when you reflect on how you have treated me. I have nothing further to say." And in a separate letter to a friend, Mary lamented, "I, who sacrificed reputation, an advantageous profession, friends, patronage, the brilliant hours of youth, and the conscious delight of correct conduct, am condemned to the scanty pittance bestowed on every indifferent page of his letters, which holds up his ermined train of ceremony." In the end, Mary had no choice but to accept the prince's insultingly low offer in exchange for his love letters. With her accumulating debt and no real further recourse she could take, Mary was forced to relent. Instead, she channeled her frustrations into a poem written around this time. As the poem reads, "If once betrayed, I scarce forgive, and though I pity all that live, and mourn for every pain, never could I court the great, or worship fools whatever their state, for falsehood I disdain." Though Mary had to concede for now, she made a promise to herself to continue to fight for the money she was rightfully owed, and to enact her revenge in any way she could. And that approaching season, her revenge would come in the form of 4 portraits, painted by London's leading portraitists, and which would be displayed in public at the upcoming Royal Academy exhibition. If Mary could not win the prince back, nor receive the money she deserved, then she'd make sure that her portraits hung as a reminder of both her unrivaled beauty and unbreakable strength, and that the prince would look a fool for ever letting such a marvelous woman go. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part episode on Mary Robinson. We will take a look at these wonderful portraits and finish Mary's story, honoring her immense legacy in part 2 of this episode. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.